So the big news coming out of West Virginia University happened actually over the weekend with the Board of Governors meeting being decided to approve Country Roads Trust, now essentially becoming Blue and Gold Enterprises, which was announced publicly on Wednesday, June 18th. And a new video came out earlier this afternoon with Ren Baker and Tony Caridi, in which he somewhat broke it all down to talk about how this is in a response to the House settlement, which was just approved this past week, and how it's going to change college athletics, especially at the Division I Power 4 level, if we want to call it that, if it's Power 2 or now Autonomous 4, how it's going to change Division I athletics forever. I'm Carson Fox. Thanks for tuning in for another edition. Hopefully, I know it's not necessarily sports, but it's sports adjacent, still talking about WVU Athletics. I am very excited to start talking about the the upcoming football season. Already doing my research, going to hopefully pump out some video content for you in the next couple of days to start talking about football, priming it up. I know we're not necessarily to Big 12 Media Days, which I feel like is almost the unofficial kickoff of the upcoming season, but there's still some things that we really need to talk about since spring practice ended in early April to where we are now 2 months later. But first and foremost, I guess where I was asking myself this question, why to make this kind of a video and even talking about something like this, is because it is interesting to me. And having listened to a couple of other WVU YouTube channels out there, I think we need a little bit pump the brakes and look a little bit more picture. Seeing one video always talking about this being a major outbreak or the start of an outbreak for WVU athletics. Really, how I see this is, and in coinciding with the House settlement, of becoming truly what NIL was supposed to be in 2021. So better late than never, but no longer, I feel like we are at a starting point now for what modern college athletics at the Division I, the highest level, is going to look like. We went from the wild, wild west from 2021 to 2025 now. With the formalization of the House settlement, we're now at a starting place where we can look at what is it going to look like. And I'm kind of be jumping around on different ideas, so I hope that you can follow me, and I'll try to keep this as succinct as humanly possible for this video. But it has connotations, I feel like, bigger picture for the SEC and Big Ten schools. This actually and absolutely kills the G6 and other FCS programs. Not FBS. So let's go back and let's talk about what exactly is West Virginia Athletics doing. So Country Roads Trust is being sunset, rebranded, now being brought in-house. So what that means is that West Virginia, I don't know if West Virginia is going to go the kind of route of we're still going to drive all of our donations from boosters, fans, and just into the Mountaineer Athletic Club. And then the business operating apparatus, all in respect to NIL, is going to come out of Gold and Blue Enterprises. But what they're saying, the four pillars that's going to make up this new Gold and Blue Enterprises: comprehensive NIL support, strategic partnerships, innovative business structure, and leadership and governance. So this is exactly really what Country Roads Trust was trying to be at the onset in 2021. What I think originally Shane Lyons intended, for things to be like, but as we know, that's not how things happened. It was just a free-for-all that the richest, the millionaires and billionaires who were alumni or fans of these big programs across the country. It took like an entire season, but then it just went crazy. I feel like really the spark that lit the flame was Jordan Addison being poached out of the transfer portal from Pitt to USC. and now kind of culminated with Nico Iamaleava from Tennessee, wanting to try and break out of his contract with Tennessee. I know we have other case point examples of Jaden Rashada in Florida. I already told you I was going to kind of be jumping around on this, so start out talking about West Virginia and what this is going to happen. But really, with the House settlement, and if you're watching this program, I'm going to assume that you at least have a general understanding or knowledge of what the House settlement implies now moving forward with college athletics. Essentially a salary cap at $20.5 million, going to be going up somewhere in the ballpark of 3 to 4% each year. So this is good. Revenue sharing with student athletes at WVU. It's 2025, y'all. This should have been happening a long, long time ago. Essentially, the money got way too big in college sports for the players to get absolutely nothing and the universities to just cash in. So now, according to Ren Baker, West Virginia is going to share up to 22% of its athletic department revenue with the players, and they will come out of different buckets from within that are revenue generators within the athletics department. He didn't necessarily break down what those buckets were to fully understand, and to be honest with you, I don't fully understand then how does the component of donations from boosters and fans then work its way as part of it. Are we talking about an entire, if he's saying it's different buckets that are going to be generated as part of the $20.5 million, is donor-funded tax-deductible donations as part of one of those buckets? That's what I don't know, and that's why I think it's so important, and it helps middle-class programs like West Virginia, who, when you think about this, y'all, this is $20.5 million now annually that WVU is going to have to pay out to its student athletes. Just a few years ago, the CEO of Country Roads Trust said that the football team's NIL for the entire roster was right around $1 million. So if we're now saying football, basketball, baseball, wrestling, women's sports, we know that predominantly that the revenue sharing is going to be allocated toward football, then men's basketball, and then I'm very curious as to what happens. Is it third? Is it baseball? Is there a little bit into men's soccer? Is there a little bit into wrestling? Like how the calling it revenue NIL, but it's the revenue share, $20.5 million. But how that's going to then be broken down and paid to those athletes. So this is a good thing. If you listen to the news, in the last or just recently, but even going back to last college football season, and that somewhere in the ballpark of $15 to $20 million was being spent just on our Ohio State's football team to win a national title. And now Texas this offseason has said, hold my beer. We're reportedly paying $30 to $35 million for its football roster. West Virginia would just be, essentially a double-A team to the major league teams like Texas, like Ohio State, like Alabama, the Oregon, the big Michigan, the biggest blue bloods in college football are on a track. I still kind of think this because of the connections with ESPN, with the SEC, and Fox Sports with the Big Ten, and how much they're generating each year in their media rights deals. But the way that the track is going, I felt as if, billionaire, millionaire owners, like, call them owners, like Phil Knight with Oregon, with Cody Campbell down at Texas Tech, the way Dave Portnoy supporting Michigan in an effort to get Bryce Underwood this past year for a 3-year, $12 million deal or something like that. That it's just nuts. And I think the majority of college athletics fans did not want to see that happen, and that this turn into like Major League Baseball. So that this is a good thing for the middle tier programs, is essentially that the House settlement will rein in some of these SEC, Big Ten, teams that are essentially bringing in twice as much money through their TV contracts with ESPN and Fox than what West Virginia is making as part of the Big 12 and their SEC Fox deal that, collaboratively that they have. So, like, that's where it's like, okay, nice. If we're all kind of playing along the same playing field, then that helps. It's not so much of a big deal that then, as I've said, Maryland and Rutgers are making twice as much money on their TV rights deal than a West Virginia is. So that then they would have to try and keep up in recruiting with it. If you're essentially playing Monopoly, they have all the properties, they have all the hotels and houses, so they're just going to run you out of the gym if you're trying and negotiate with a recruit on dollars and cents. How are you going to compete with some of those programs? So essentially now everybody's playing on the same playing field because there is the NIL Go clearinghouse through the newly created College Sports Commission, which is essentially the enforcement arm, the sword that the NCAA has needed since 2021 when NIL became legal. Again, better late than never, but finally is now happening. So any NIL deal that is perpetuated or negotiated between a student athlete and an entity over $600 has to now go through this clearinghouse. Now, my personal opinion here, I think $600 is way too small. I mean, when we're talking about Bryce Underwood and what he was making, Nico Iamaleava, what he was making, so many others out there. I mean, apparently Texas Tech allegedly spent $20 million in the transfer portal this past offseason alone. So we're talking big money here, y'all. And I mean, my friend Mountaineer Paul said on his program a couple of months ago about West Virginia was potentially spending somewhere between $6 to $8 million alone in NIL deals for the men's basketball team this upcoming season. So it's going to scale back on the student athlete side from what they're going to be making just truly from the revenue sharing department. So it's like, man, if you were a student athlete there from 2021 till now, you were making the most money probably that any college, athletes have ever made and that may possibly ever may make. But this is good for West Virginia. So now you have to solely concentrate on focusing on that $20.5 million. So that's where I'm kind of confused here. Is Golden Blue Enterprises just going to be an additional fundraising arm out of the Mountaineer Athletic Club, out of WVU Athletics? Well, no, I don't think so. Because, and this is where I kind of want to take a pause here and just say that, and I don't do this a lot on all of my programs, that we should take a pause and really give a kudos, shout out, congratulations, thankful for how forward-thinking, how innovative, how aggressive the WVU Athletics, especially led now by Ren Baker instead of Shane Lyons, with him out of the picture, fully embracing Country Roads Trust and going out there and trying new things, from Country Roads Trust Lager to the 1863, Swilled Dog Whiskey, to the Goat Restaurant that's down in Morgantown. That they're, and all the different uniforms that West Virginia is having, that West Virginia is just not having these commemorative 1960 uniforms or the, last year, the black and gold the black and silver and white Coal Rush uniforms just to do it, y'all. It's a money-making operation. That is what they're trying to do, is they're trying to get fans like me and you to go out there and buy jerseys and buy caps and buy hoodies and buy merch. Like that's what they're trying to do. So, in this kind of respect for Golden Blue Enterprises, I'm very interested to see into what they come up with next. Is it, like he's saying, in perhaps a capital project to build sort of a business district, all in the name of trying to raise revenue for the athletic department, for WVU Athletics. Trading cards. I think we already kind of have that, but I don't know. I'm just kind of spitballing some ideas here, because the way that I see this working, and what's going to be very interesting to see around the country, is these teams that have billionaire owners who have twice as much money in TV media rights money aren't going to sit idly by and just say, okay, well, we have all of this money that we're making, twice as much as teams in the ACC and the Big 12. We're still going to try and compete in this NIL world, even though technically, we can't because of this new NIL clearinghouse. They're going to get creative. They're going to try and find loopholes. And it's going to really fall on this NIL clearinghouse to bring down the hammer on those who violate the rules. It can't be just a slap on the wrist for Kentucky basketball or Miami football, and you're going to really crack down on West Virginia, like the Raekwon Battle situation a few years ago. And unfortunately, the NCAA has such a terrible reputation, so there's not really much hope or prospect, I feel like, in this College Sports Commission if it has any sort of a connection to the NCAA. So I hope that this College Sports Commission lays down the hammer on the first person and means business. The peace through strength approach. They're just going to say, hey, do not violate these new rules. We are trying to, have the guidelines that coaches, athletic directors, presidents have been clamoring for 4 years now, and we finally have some semblance of it. And again, it's going to make it harder on the programs who have all this much money or don't have enough of it to even fully support the $20.5 million revenue share. It's the middle class programs, I feel like, who are really going to thrive the most out of this settlement. Theoretically, because I can also see a world, because where I first thought of this, and this is why I really was thankful to take the time, listen to the Ren Baker video today, because I was thinking about making this video last night. So just kind of coincidental and thankful that happened, was, again, and I read a good article in Lindy's magazine about the evolution of the general manager in college sports, tweeted out to Dennis Dodd, listened to a couple of podcasts, one with Jim Cavale from, I think it's athletes.org, also Trey Wallace, who's from Outkick and Fox. And these collectives are going to, I don't think they're necessarily going to go away. If they don't take the kind of approach that West Virginia has and try and, come in-house, like I said, to drive those 501c3 tax-deductible donations, especially while everything regarding Title IX is in flux. You had the Biden administration having a memorandum right there at the end of December, made a video about it, saying that NIL was going to have to be equally distributed between females and males, even though female sports teams don't generate a profit. While football, we definitely know does, and so does men's basketball. And the Trump administration came in and said, yeah, that's not happening. So as soon as the House settlement was finalized and approved, there's already a group of female athletes putting out a lawsuit out there challenging Title IX. Now that will get held up in the courts. How long did it happen for the House settlement? 2 years? So for at least maybe 2 more years, if this goes all the way up to the Supreme Court about Title IX and NIL differences in opinion, we'll have to see how that is then applied down the road. So it's really a lot of wait and see and being reactionary and not being proactionary. And we also don't know how this is going to have an impact on antitrust violations, the cap. If someone tries to go out there and make some sort of an NIL deal, and again, if there's some sort of alumni-based ties of a Dave Portnoy wants to go out there and once again go and sign the next Bryce Underwood out there and the NCAA clearinghouse dings this NIL dings him for this, says no, that can't happen. If we catch wind of it, this still does happen, that player is going to be suspended, or the coach is being suspended, lessen the next year's revenue share pool. I can just see this getting very messy, and that eventually, down the road, as these next lawsuits happen, is we're all kind of coming to an inevitable conclusion of a totally different, even, it's going to work itself out with the things that are kind of or still the shades of gray between the black and white of the way the law reads and the rules are and how people operate until the next iteration of the highest level of college athletics. Because I can't see a world in which a Texas A&M, Ohio State sits around and only spends, again, $20.5 million on all of its student athletes when it's generating, in Ohio State's case, the most money of any athletic department in the country at $250 million. So, this is kind of radical. I could see a world in which these collectives try and set up, or try and pass through dollars that come into the collective through a local business in the local town where the college or university is, and try and filter that money away through, or is it through the use of assets? So talking with a coworker about this, and it's kind of crazy to me, but just think about it. If you as a collective, externally from the athletic department or internally, you can't necessarily pay a player any more than what you're giving out of the $20.5 million revenue share. But what if they tell that player, name it, what do you want? What do you want us to buy for you? You can't give you money so that you can go independently spend it on what you want. But do you want your own personal trainer? Do you want your own personal chef? Do you want us to buy you a condominium in town? Or, I know these players already have unbelievable facilities, but does someone in Austin, in Texas or Lubbock, Texas, you already seen the metropolis that they built for their football program and athletic facilities. Do we trend back toward that? In that we're building these colossus, condominiums for these student athletes with indoor lazy rivers, and they get to drive Lamborghinis around campus, and you get what I'm saying with this. Those are all assets that are on the books for the athletic department. So it's not necessarily going toward NIL in this cap. But they're still spending money that maybe a program like a West Virginia just doesn't have. That if they're trying to commit all of this to this $20.5 million revenue share. And then there are some schools that I'm just telling you right now may even be in the Big Ten or SEC who just don't want to get necessarily caught up into this rat race. I know that, all of those schools in the SEC, and for at least 10, I would feel like maybe 12 out of the Big Ten really feel driven, connected to athletic endeavors, so that they'll continue to fight within this national rat race that there is. And I'm leaving out the topic of realignment and what that could potentially bring down the road once these TV media rights deals and the opting out of the grant of rights becomes more of a palatable number for a lot of these programs. I'm looking at you, Florida State. I'm looking at you, Clemson, in the ACC. But I know I'm kind of going off on a tangent. May have gone off the rails here. But it's just coming back to the fact that I think that West Virginia is going to continue to be as creative as they can in trying to generate revenue in the ways that they have already with. But it's going to have to be so tailored and so desired by Mountaineer fans like you and I, because unfortunately the outside business investment into NIL at West Virginia in comparison to some of the biggest schools in the country is not necessarily there. I mean, there are the biggest business, the biggest entity in the state of West Virginia is WVU. Meanwhile, in Greater Pittsburgh, there are 10 Fortune 500 companies. That's just in Greater Pittsburgh, which isn't the biggest city in the country. I don't even know if it's top 50. So, and even then, are companies in this economy, in this world, really entering into NIL deals with student athletes? If there isn't already some sort of an alumni connection or just huge fan interest, I'm so thankful for all that Pat McAfee's done. I know probably Ken Kendrick is probably the most publicly facing booster that West Virginia has. Entities like Toothman Ford, has been very public on social media and the way that they've worked with student athletes. And I know I'm probably naming out quite a few. And West Virginia is trying, again, be as competitive as humanly possible. But going back to everything that's going on with this Gold and Blue Enterprises that's coming out there is that they are going to be the ones who are going to have to work, again, strategic partnerships, because it's asking a lot for a guy like a Nico Marchiol or the whole basketball team's new, but, Jaheim White, Rodney Gallagher. Like, if you don't necessarily have that kind of professional business savvy and the way to market yourself, especially using social media, education and all that's great, but I don't want to have to do that work if I'm a 4 or 5 star athlete. I want to be working on my craft. I want to be, working hard in the strength and conditioning center. I want to be working out in practice. I want to try to become the best student athlete I can be. All of the other peripheral stuff, I kind of am hoping that the school will take care of that for me if they don't outright pay me directly, which is the way things have been for the solid last 4 years. So this is changing everything back on its head into, putting the onus back on the player. And if these guys have agents now, then the agents can handle, some of these kinds of things, but putting it on the player to go out and make their own deals themselves, no, they're going to try and lean on the school, and this Gold and Blue Enterprises can make that happen. I'm just saying, what kind of connections does Ren Baker and others have to the biggest businesses in the country who maybe have the budgets to be able to spend, or or is it just locally in West Virginia? And what can those businesses then spend on players? I'm not saying it's not going to be the kinds of deals that we've just seen prior to this, from 2021 to June of 2025. It was the wild, wild west in which I'm telling you, there was just a lot happening behind the scenes, and this should hopefully then tamper down the transfer portal. That if you get some sort of more structured system, players aren't going to, when they have a good season or, they feel as if they can make more money on the open market than what that school that you're previously at can afford for you or wants to pay for you. I'm just going to go into the transfer portal and I'm going to be a free agent for 4 straight seasons. That then, okay, you kind of know what you're getting with the school that you have. If the money's comparable at another school, we're still ultimately, at the end of the day, talking about how good of a program that you're at. So again, coaching is going to matter. Performance on the field, winning, contending for conference championships, putting players into the professional drafts, Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA. All of that is going to matter, as always. So hopefully now it's not apples and oranges with all these schools around the country in terms of money. But perhaps, like I said, if Texas wants to go rogue, and again, they're going to offer the same kind of money in revenue share as a West Virginia, but they're going to put an not calling it an NIL package, but they're going to put some sort of package together for their student athlete that, they're buying all of these things for the players. That's perhaps a loophole. Or I'm just very curious, something like a Gold and Blue Enterprises here, are they going to try and set up their own kind of businesses out there? And again, is that the way that money then flows from those businesses to the student athletes outside of the $20.5 million revenue share cap? I don't know that answer. It's kind of a little bit Breaking Bad to me there, that you're buying a car wash and trying to launder money through it some way. But this is the crazy world of college sports in which we live, and then it's all going to fall back on NIL Go, this clearinghouse to be able to go out there and identify who those bad actors are, and can they bring down the hammer? Can they actually bring down consequences and penalties that don't violate, or does this all violate antitrust? Or if it doesn't, will they actually go after the bad offenders, especially if they're the biggest programs in the sport? And then what's that going to necessarily look like, on an individual basis, and then totality. But again, I think this is just a short fix, a short-term fix to a long-term problem. That it's 2025. West Virginia is locked into this Big 12 media rights deal for the next 5 years. Same with, ESPN, same with the Big Ten, same with the ACC. I know there's some opt-outs coming in the next couple of years that a school like an FSU, like a Clemson, might be able to opt out of to join a new conference. But it's just interesting when you put all of this into perspective of what the House settlement is now forcing programs like a West Virginia to go do. So it doesn't put any less of an emphasis, I feel like, on fans to still contribute what they can. Again, tax deductible, so you can write that off on your next year's taxes to still support the athletics program. And it's going to put more onus on the athletics program to raise revenue to be able to fully support this $20.5 million annual cap. But hopefully it can rein in some of the biggest programs out there, and it can also shed light on, for future conference realignment, who those schools are that aren't going to put this kind of a commitment into things. And maybe, just maybe, that leads to good things down the road for West Virginia. If it becomes just a Power 2, or the Big 12 has the third most staying power of any conference out there, the ACC crumbles because, say, a Wake Forest and a Boston College and a Duke aren't going to go out there and do these kinds of things and spend $20.5. I think they can maybe do that on their men's basketball program. But then is that football going to suffer? I don't know. It's just a very, very crazy, chaotic world right now. But I'm thankful that West Virginia has a very forward-thinking leadership, staff headed up by Ren Baker, the Board of Governors. I don't necessarily like that they instituted a $250 additional student fee on students for athletic competition fee or something like that. Because what if you're a student in there who doesn't necessarily care about, foot athletics programs? You're just going there to be a student. Maybe you're a science researcher and sports aren't your thing and stuff like that, but you're going to have to now pay $250 in a student fee. But as I said in a video a couple of months ago about additional opportunities for West Virginia to generate revenue, that they have to do something like that. So we'll see if this is, the first step of many. If we're talking about naming rights change to Mountaineer Field or Milan Puskar Stadium, as I talked about in that video, and other things. I hope and would hate to see West Virginia have to cut sports, or if they go as so radical into change conferences or change divisions for some of its sports. Unfortunately, I'm looking at a program like a rowing, like a volleyball, like a gymnastics that are, you can still have, but if they're a Division II or Division III program that you don't have to fully support with scholarships and NIL contributions, then, what does happen to WVU specifically, because that's who I care about. And if you're listening to this channel, that's who you care about. But then also college-wide. I think already in just the last week or so since the House settlement's been approved, 37 Olympic sports programs across the country have already been cut at different schools. So just very curious to see. I don't know, it was kind of a logical conclusion that needed to happen. But now it's like, oh, why? And that of revenue sharing to student athletes. I think, again, the money got way too big and it went way too one-sided toward the universities to keeping all the money that the players didn't now, get any sort of a cut into it. But now it's like, well, here are the unintended consequences that now come with that. and that we operate. These are professional or semi-professional enterprises that operate under the guise and masquerading under a university educational system. It's just crazy. That's not how, college athletics really started and were for many, many decades. But again, just got way too popular, way too financially driven. And this is now like the reformation that happened in 2021 with making NIL legal. So I'd love to know your thoughts. Are you happy about this? Kind of excited as I am that West Virginia has this gold and blue enterprises. It's and all that much different than Country Roads Trust out there. Again, I don't think West Virginia is necessarily not keeping up with the Joneses, because they're doing everything that they possibly can within their, control and power to try and be innovative, aggressive, and try and make NIL dollars. But they don't have a Phil Knight. They don't have a Cody Campbell. They don't have, they have some big players. West Virginia, I'm not going to not undersell the power of Mountaineer Nation and alumni and what West Virginia alumni and fans and boosters contribute. But in trying to keep up with, schools like Oregon, Texas Tech, Texas A&M, like, it just seems like it's a whole different stratosphere, and trying to do it on a yearly basis. There's donor fatigue nationally, but I'm sure that West Virginia is, going back to the same Ren Bakers had to do for the same wells year in and year out, paying for Neil Brown's buyout, paying for all of the things in NIL contributions to try and keep up with the competition as best as possible. We're doing that, but it's just like trying to find those other pockets of money out there. Now it's just going to have to fall on West Virginia to be able to do it themselves, and hopefully through Gold and Blue Enterprises that they can do some things creatively. So again, tell your friends, tell your family, tell your dog that I do this each and every week. I have a lot of fun doing it. Thanks for tuning in. Going to have more content for you upcoming. Hopefully can talk about some things on the field, on the court, stuff like that, not all the stuff that happens in the background and periphery of college sports. But gotta talk about this because it is just such an earth-shattering change for college athletics. So thanks for tuning in, everybody. Hail West Virginia. Let's go.